Hey everybody, this is Mike Sandoval. I am back. Last week I took a day off because I needed some Mimi's time. And now I'm back with WandaVision review show for episode 4. And we got our normal panel here. We got Tatiana Ramirez. We got Malik Patterson. Let's talk some WandaVision. What did you guys think of this latest episode?
Mind blowing. Malik, go ahead. You can start.
Best episode so far. But it's so interesting to see how everything kind of tied together. And then now that we're kind of up to date and they were doing like a going back in the past and showing you previous episodes and how the weird quirks that happened, like the dude coming out of the sewer, really wasn't a scary guy at all. He was just trying to figure out how to get inside. And then I think it's also really interesting to point out how some people can get inside, but others can't. I think you have to be either you have to wear a certain kind of like attire, or is it just you in general? Is it like your intentions? Because Jimmy Woo pointed out that he wasn't able to get inside specifically. So I think that's a really interesting key fact.
Yeah, exactly. Tatiana?
Yes, as soon as the episode started, I was waiting for an intro to start, but it starts like right away. And, it made me think that, okay, now it's actually a Marvel movie. It's kind of showing that, okay, it's finally starting. They're getting to the point of what's going on in the seasons and the episodes, But I was just so confused. Like, there was so much going on. It definitely, I think that they should have gone a little bit longer as to like the decades to get to like where we are now. Mm-hmm. I feel like they're moving way too fast. So I think you really have to pay attention to what's going on, because I had to go back a few times.
Well, let's go back to the beginning of this episode because, yeah, I think now you're starting to see that you got to have watched some of the films to kind of get an idea of where you're at, especially in Infinity War and Endgame. Definitely. But when we look at the beginning of the episode, we see everybody returning from what they call as the blip, but it was when Thanos snapped 50% of the population around the globe. We see them all come back, and we see that Monica Rambeau was one of the people who got snapped. And the fact that I was thinking about this, being somebody who's lost his mom, when she comes back and realizes that her mom passed away, I was thinking about the whole Marvel universe and imagining like these people coming back and not knowing what their lives were like. Mm-hmm. And the franticness and the craziness it was in those scenes. I was like, we saw a little bit of it on Spider-Man Far From Home, but not to this extent. No, it was a great way to start off this episode.
Not nearly. You saw the panic in the people that came back, because even in Endgame, when everybody came back, and in Spider-Man Far From Home, it wasn't a panic because most of the people that we were focused on knew exactly what was happening. But from the little instance of the doctor saying, "Hey, do you have a phone? I need to call my wife." Like that little moment right there really shows how crazy and how much time has been lost from the blip itself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the one thing we finally get to see Sword. Mm-hmm. What Sword's base looks like, what Monica Rambeau plays in this whole thing. And we see some familiar faces as well. We see Jimmy back. We see Darcy Lewis back, who we haven't seen Darcy in some time, but we see them all coming back into this episode, and you see them interacting. Jimmy with Monica looking outside the bubble. And it's funny how the cops aren't too helpful with what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if they're playing a part into all this. Or maybe they just don't know anything and they just happen to be there.
Well, I would say the sheriff, I'm going to keep an eye out for him, because he says he's from Eastview, and Westview's not a thing, but you can clearly see Westview behind you. Mm-hmm. And there's somebody that says, "Hey, I live and grew up on the opposite side of town. How do you never hear about this part of town?" Mm-hmm. If it truly never existed. Mm-hmm. So there's just little things like that. I love not to kind of fast forward an episode, but I love how anything that goes into that time period, because at the beginning of this episode, I was ready for 80s. I was ready for kind of
Yeah,
I was ready for it all, and it didn't start off like that at all. We got no form of the 80s, but we did see that a lot of things are still the same inside their time period. Nothing's changed inside of the bubble, as we say, as of right now.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the one thing when we see Monica Rambeau put her hand into the field and be sucked in, and then you see that Darcy figures out what's going on with the different, having to pull old televisions in order to see the transmission and see what's going on inside the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we start seeing what's really starting getting hints of what's really going on, especially as they refer to the people in the bubble as the cast. Like, oh, this person playing casted as this person,
Mm-hmm.
which they really did pay it off. Like if it's a TV show that's being filmed, and they're trying to figure out how this all started, which is it's interesting, especially with the editing.
Yeah,
Things that are edited out.
they even have their New Jersey IDs on each person, so that makes me wonder initially, are these people missing and then they found them alive inside of Westview, or are these people normal people and they just so happen to get another copy of these people's actual identity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's the one thing like I'm purely curious about, especially when we all saw last episode when Wanda found out Monica was in the bubble and got rid of her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you've seen episode 3, you already know that. We're not going into any spoilers right now. So that's why I'm kind of like cutting some stuff out so that we could talk about, because you're going to have to watch the episode. But this one you do know, and we've seen it, that we see that Monica finally says, and we're going to have to spoil this because even though I have a feeling people know this,
Mm-hmm.
that it's Wanda. It's all Wanda.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it leads me to what is going on with Wanda. Is this a PTSD episode from the fight with losing Vision and having the fight with Thanos and everything that she lost throughout since Ultron and Avengers Age of Ultron and what's going on in Infinity War and Endgame, all the loss she has had, and this is a way to deal with it?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
For me, I know quite a few. My knowledge in Marvel is fairly extensive, a little bit more than the average person. But I always go to my encyclopedia of Marvel, which is my cousin. He's read almost every single comic, and he's told me way back before we were even really introduced to Wanda or Scarlet Witch, is who he originally. He's the most powerful people in the entire universe. But this here, if she is creating this entire bubble and she is being the host behind the entire show that goes on, then that just confirms that she is probably the most powerful person in Marvel, because she's not only brought other people in, sucked them into this whole lifestyle and made everybody believe it, but she also brought Vision back to life. How did she do that? I don't know. I'm pretty sure later, but I have so many questions for Wanda being kind of the focal point of this entire thing.
And Tatiana, since you're the newcomer in this Marvel universe that we've been living in for the last 11 years now, what did you think about seeing this and seeing what you? Because this is where you. Because this is what I like having you on this panel. You're seeing this through fresh eyes.
Definitely, yes.
What are your thoughts on what you've seen so far, especially with her knowing that this is something that she's created?
It's really intriguing, and I think I'm with the audience, intrigued with what you are all saying, because I've never seen like Marvel movies, so I was confused as I saw this episode, and some things are being cleared up for me. And seeing how that was the same thing I thought with Wanda. Like, okay, is this a bubble that she's creating? Is she doing it for herself? And I don't know. I thought it was. I'm still confused because questions are being answered, but more questions are coming within those answers that are being those questions that are answered. Um, but I'm coming to think that it is Wanda that's actually doing this, but is it actually for sure that we know that she's created this bubble?
Well, that's the thing that we need to see. I think she's like, to me, I think she created it,
Mm-hmm.
but I wouldn't be shocked if there's somebody in the back pulling the strings and leading her to saying, "Hey, do this. That I get your pain. Live in this. If you don't want to expose yourself to the world, hey, do this." And maybe there is another force involved, and then we're going to notice that who the real villain is in all this, and maybe Wanda's being manipulated.
Yeah,
I would
because
love to, but then there is that kind of, we could see her go back to being somewhat of a villain because that's how she was introduced to us as a villain. Not necessarily a villain from her standpoint, from her eyes, but from the standpoint of Marvel and from Sword and Shield, he wasn't initially a villain, and so maybe this is a really extreme form of PTSD and coping. But with the PTSD, did she create the babies as a form of, hey, we have this perfect family and this perfect life now, so we can live harmoniously? Because we got to see Vision at the end of what he truly was at an Endgame when he took the Vision Stone from him, which, I mean, to the basic viewer, it was kind of creepy to watch. I mean, I don't want to see no eyes, it looks really flushed out and just a big chunk of his head, which I'm pretty sure for you, Tati, was crazy. I know you haven't really seen, but when you go back and watch, you'll be able to understand the totality of what happened. But this is by far one of my favorite shows of the year.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Malik. I know you saw it at midnight. You had the covers like this already. Because I was like, it kind of shocked me that they really did that. Like showed him as he did at the end of Endgame.
Mm-hmm.
That was really shocking to me that we saw that. And and see, this is one thing. Like getting off, we already talked about a majority of the show already, but I want to get off. It may be on topic and it may be off topic. This is really leading into the whole House of M. It seems like when in the comic book when Wanda got rid of all the mutants. I'm curious. Is this the way that they're going to bring mutants into the MCU and instead do a reversal of like the House of M comic book, and actually she's going to do something in order to bring mutants into the realm, into the MCU? I'm curious.
That's a really good point, because then how do you introduce that entire? Because that is the mutants, Professor X. I mean, Magneto, like everybody in there is a completely whole new aspect because they operate on an entire like a company of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I know eventually we're going to see them migrate and intermingle. I'm pretty sure that's part of Phase 4. I don't know the entirety of Phase 4, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to see it come. But for them to be introduced in WandaVision makes me wonder, okay, then what are they going to do with the new show that's coming out as well after that?
Yeah, and that's one thing I'm curious about. I'm curious how, because it seems like they're playing a lot of House of M.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just, and it's just speculation. I'm not in the writers' room. I'm not in the. We're barely getting any access to Disney Plus stuff. But I am really shooting off the top of my head here. But it just seems interesting to me But the one thing that I did want to mention that I had told you all off the air before we went on is that Paul Bettany said and has been hinting that there's a special guest in the season. So I'm kind of curious who it's going to be. He's already let it out of the bag, so we know it's. If he said something, and you know it's somebody from the past, some from the past of the Marvel what we have so far.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody give their ideas of who do you think it is. I think it's going to be Doctor Strange. That he's going to show up because since they say this is leading into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, but that's my guess. Who do you guys think it's going to be?
It could be Captain Marvel, potentially, because I know Sword is generally intergalactic. Captain Marvel's intergalactic. I'm just kind of spitballing, throwing stuff out there. Potentially.
Tatiana?
That's a hard question since I'm not really familiar with them, but I hope it's a villain though. I hope it's not like I'm thinking it might be someone unexpected, like really unexpected.
Good answer. Good answer.
That's my guess so far.
the Captain Marvel thing, I could see that. It makes sense because of her link with Monica Rambeau. Mm-hmm. And also, who else can match Wanda's powers? And that's the thing. She is the strongest, but Captain Marvel does have a lot of. We've seen that she has a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of curious because they both got their powers from Infinity Stones.
Right.
So it's kind of curious to see what's going to happen. But, well, we don't want to be here keeping everybody on YouTube all this long because it is Friday, though for some of us, we're still quarantined. So we're not going to be able to party yet. But we don't want to keep you too long. I mean, on the East Coast, wrestling's about to start. So if you're a wrestling fan, we know we got to catch you up on your wrestling. But everybody, how could they find you on social media?
You can find me as my username. I'm trying to find my bubble here. Tati's Yolani.
And then mine is Malik, and then just add ONA Malik on Ox. It's fairly simple. On all social media platforms.
Cool. And I'm Mike Sandoval. You can find me at Muse_Mike on Instagram. Don't forget to follow Muse TV. We are here every Friday at 3:30 p.m. We do it at 3:30, 6:30 Eastern because we want you to be able to hopefully have seen the show before we talk about the show, unlike some people who do it at midnight and then it just blows my whole day. Because I know what it's like. Especially being field. But hey, don't forget, if you like this video, like us, subscribe, click the bell notifications after you know when we're going to be going on talking about the show next Friday. And stay tuned. We got some new stuff coming to Muse TV. It's going to be premiering starting February 8th. So stay tuned for that. And I just want to say thank you so much for staying here, being a part of our show. And we'll see you next week for WandaVision episode 5.
Bye.